we can make it happen in an
We
authentic
can do all
way.
that.
Like
Yeah,
it's Chicago.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not,
Chicago.
Is the OG.
Well, there is a House of Blues not
Like
in Cambridge,
everywhere.
but there's a House of Blues in Boston. But yes, it's not the original.
So the original was Cambridge.
Yeah.
Go figure. It should have been Chicago though.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Let's
All right.
just tell
Let's
the
go.
lie.
Let's go. Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Alex Williams, founder and editor-in-chief of the New Stack, and we're coming to you live from Chef Conf here in Chicago with another episode of the New Stack Makers, sponsored by Chef. And thanks to Chef, then Chef offers a comprehensive suite of automation products that can manage it all from infrastructure, runtime environments, applications, and even the DevOps workflow itself. And today I'm with Adam Jacobs, CTO at Chef, and Corey Scobie, Chef's Senior Vice President of Product and Engineering. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So psyched to be here.
Yeah.
What is my first Chef Conf?
Yeah, Corey. How about that?
Oh, it's awesome. I love this. This is tech conferences all have a thing, and they're supposed to be fun and authentic, and sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't, but this is authentic. This is real. This community is amazing.
We got to sing this morning.
We got to sing. That was so good.
Yeah.
Choir.
That was so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite piece of that is that, like, we hire really amazing creative people, and then you don't get in their way. And so if you do that, then what happens is the choir people show up. And, like, if it was, like, me and Nathan trying to lead us all in a sing-along or whatever, like, not cool. You'd be like, no, we're not singing. This isn't fun. You could stop the joke. But, like, those guys show up, and they're, like, the world's greatest people at getting 1,000 people to sing along to a Beatles song on the planet. And then they're like, okay, now we're all going to sing along, and it's dope. And so, like, it's not, I think that's the magic to it, like, to your authenticity point. Like, what makes it authentic is that they're actually great at it, and that they got to do the thing they were doing without having to, like, also give a, like, awkward shout out to infrastructure automation or some shit,
Exactly.
Which, like, we could have made them do. We could have been like, okay, at the end of the Beatles song,
Plug here.
make them sing about habitat, or whatever. And, like,
That
we
would have
didn't.
been miserable.
Oh, it would have
been awful.
It would have been awful. But you see how easy we could have done it. You know what I mean? Like, you're 2 seconds from hiring choir to making them also make a song about Hadoop. And, like, it's just, it's a really fine line.
Habitat.
Yeah, exactly. 3-part harmony, And, like, that's the inauthentic tech conference move. And really the only gap there is just not doing that.
Yes.
Just don't do
Tech
that.
conferences that won't be named, they do that kind of stuff now.
Right.
Well, they'll have, like, they'll spend tens of thousands of dollars on some video, which will then, like, talk about, some data extraction.
Right, sure. The slogan for whatever it is. And, like, God bless them. Like, it's cool, but what it is. Like, it smells like what it is. And, I'm not sure the audience needed it. But we convince ourselves we need it,
I didn't know what to expect. I just showed up at 8:30 in the morning, and I'm thinking, boy, this is kind of early for a keynote. I said, but then it showed up, and then it was like, choir. So I'm thinking, this will probably last about 10 minutes or so.
Like an hour later, they've done an encore.
An hour later, I'm up on stage, I'm singing.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah. And the other thing I think about, my observation about the conference is that everybody that comes to this conference, like, comes as who they are, right?
Yeah.
You just show up and you're you. And, like, it doesn't, there's no sort of, it's very authentic and it's very inclusive. And
yeah,
I
people
love
get
that.
to bring their full human.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I'm proudest of, probably, is that, like, there's a lot of different variants of humanity.
Right.
And, like, they all get to show up at Chef Conf.
Right.
And, like, they all get to be that person.
Right.
They get to
in a way that they may not actually get to do that at work.
And nobody ever says anything.
Right.
Like, our friends who show up in, like, crazy costumes and, like, weird outfits and all, and, like, just nobody mentions it.
They don't even, like,
it's not like
think twice.
everybody's like, why is that person here? Like, nah. Like, you're just like, let's do it. It's awesome. All people want is a selfie. And, like, it's the greatest thing.
But
I
you're
was
human.
I was walking out of breakfast this morning, and there were 2 guys wearing tails.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
big
about.
furry tails. And nobody even batted an eyelash.
No.
And I love that.
They're core
That's
community members. They've been here for 6 years. They, like, brought you corned beef hash. They're the greatest. They're the best dudes ever.
Right.
And God, it's the that piece of Chef, I was talking to Nathan Haney-Smith, who's one of my best friends and is the co-founder of Chef. And we met a long time ago in a monsoon rainstorm in Phoenix, Arizona, where the church nearby our house had just blown up. So it had been hit by lightning, and it had this massive steel cross, and it had blown. It had blown up. Obviously, we're talking about technology.
Is this a plot line to a movie?
It had blown up, and it took out all the power. And we had all just moved there to go to college for like a second, and so the whole apartment complex was just full of people who had moved there like last week, And so then the wrath of God came, and there was like sandstorms and thunder and lightning, and it had blown up the church. And so I get home from a job interview, actually, having just barely not outraced the storm. So I saw the lightning hit the cross and blow it up, which then took the power out. And so I was the one who brought back to the thing what the explosion was,
Right.
And so that was cool. And then there was this crazy dude who was in boxer shorts and had long hair in a monsoon with a Nerf football, and he was trying to corral people into the hot tub. He was like, "We got to get in the hot tub," and we were like, "We're all gonna die if we get in the hot tub." And he's like, "I know, but it'll be awesome," And so you can sort of draw a line from that moment where it was like, how about we just it would be great if we were just ourselves, and then we were together and it was better, and we could just keep doing that. And you could sort of draw a line from that instant to here, where now there's all these people around us, and they just don't know that they're secretly a part of the line that started from the monsoon.
Little did they know.
You know what I mean? But it's all really connected in a very real, authentic way.
Until just now.
But you would get in the hot tub. You know what I'm saying?
Totally, I would have been in the hot tub.
There's no question that Corey Scobie would have gotten the hot tub.
Yeah.
And that is one of the reasons I like working with you.
Chef,
anyway, I feel like that tangent really was extreme. So thanks, New Stack listeners. I hope you learned something today.
The church explosion.
The church explosion.
We're going to bring that back. At some point in this conversation, there's going to be
another church explosion.
I have this vision of this cross just going.
That's what happened. It was incredible. Yeah, it was nuts.
And the other thing about this conference is really geeky. So you get all that, you get all people coming in for themselves, but it's very technical, and it's
absolutely,
and it's very solid. And then you guys followed the choir with a terrific demo by Anu about EKS and how they're using Chef with it for compliance, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you talked, and I was really interested in your in your discussion about talking about looking back at the roots. I guess this was post-church explosion when you were talking today.
Yes, the church explosion was
very
when I
early.
was 20. So
You're not 20? You're not 21.
Not now. I'm 40. So I was not 21.
This was
yet.
well past the church
I was
explosion.
probably 19. Yeah. Church explosion. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is, yes, Chef was founded 10 years ago, and so Jesse Robbins, my co-founder and the founding CEO, came back and gave the original Series A pitch, which was a delight. Yeah. And you sort of tie back into the idea that how we're all sort of on this journey trying to figure out how to become better at our craft and how to make our companies better and how to serve better our customers or to serve better the world, and how as you do that more often, you learn things and you see more, and the more you get out in the world, the more you can assimilate, and the more you can sort of return to other people what you have seen. I think that was the distillation of my own keynote, I think. Yeah.
Jesse gets up and he's like, "I'm not sure about this, but but Adam thinks this is a good idea. Yeah. So I'm going to go with it."
Jesse crushed it.
He did crush it.
So there was you want a Jesse Robbins story. I don't know if this
okay,
is
yeah, I want to hear it.
So I was a systems administrator, right? And I don't know anything about anything. I do. I started a consulting company, and I knew I could do a thing, but nobody's going to give me money. I now know. There's no venture capitalist in the world that was going to give me at that time a couple $1 million. That wasn't a thing. And so it was Jesse who showed up and was like, "Oh, we could do this, man. We could." I was the master of disaster at Amazon.com. I know Tim O'Reilly. I started this conference. We got this, right? And so, I believe in Jesse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not that I necessarily believed in myself, because I did not, because I was like, I have no idea what
Nor
we're
the
doing.
technology.
But I mean, right, because I know all of the ways that it's just like I wrote some Ruby, you know, and but like I believed in Jesse, and so Jesse. We go to this meeting and we're wearing suits because they told us we should wear suits, right? And so we're like ill-fitting like men's warehouse suits. Jesse's was tailored, mine was not, because Jesse is a much suaver, like savvy person. And so his dad had given him like a really adult, like grown ass man Rolex.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about? Like
Like the big
one.
big dial.
A man watch, you know, like not a child watch, like a man watch, you know. And so we sit down in this meeting, the first pitch that we do, and we're wearing suits or whatever, and he's wearing his jacket. And he pops the arm off a little bit, pulls it up, and puts it on the table, you know? So the watch is facing out. And it was this like super adult power move, you know? And I don't know if it worked on the venture capitalists, but it super worked on me.
Yes.
You know? Like it ridiculously
You
worked
were
on me.
once a believer, and now you were a super believer.
I was 1,000% down on the Jesse Robbins train, because it was just like, I got this, you know. It was, you know, like yeah, and like wow, it was so beautiful. Anyway,
so good.
Yeah, you can't not believe in Jesse Robbins.
Yeah, I mean, but the whole kind of pitch about, you know, what you guys said in there was just great, because it did kind of set up like how there were just kind of the beginnings to think about abstractions. Actually, the abstractions were already in effect, actually, weren't they?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
like, you know, Corey's background, you worked at Akamai for a long time.
Yep.
And like one of the things you did was help lead them through that abstraction problem, right?
Exactly.
Where like they had built like a customer centric kind of platform.
Right.
And then you had helped them figure out like, all right, how am I going to adapt to this other way?
Right.
Like,
yeah. Like there was no abstraction. It was just this big amorphous box, basically, right? And that was part of the secret, is figuring out how to put an abstraction in there that was something that made sense to people, right?
Yeah.
And was the right boundary. Yeah.
But like Akamai couldn't see it on their own.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like somebody like Corey, or I'm sure there were other people too at Akamai who like saw it, but like it's hard to see it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So in fairness, they recognized that they needed an abstraction.
Yeah.
So they found me and said, "Give us an abstraction."
How did they know? Like, you know.
Enough had changed in the industry, and this was 2012 roughly, and the world had started to move towards this cloud concept. And ironically, Akamai was a company that was founded basically as a cloud, right? It's a giant distributed computing platform that has where you pay for the service that you use. You don't install anything in anybody's, data center or anything. Like it had all of the characteristics of being a cloud company, but never used the word cloud to describe themselves in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, but you set it up by calling a dude on the phone.
Right. Yes. Yeah, exactly. It was a cloud company, but the interface was a human being and a phone call.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So and so they recognized the world had moved enough and they'd heard enough feedback from customers to say like, this is no longer the operating model that we can be successful with you on in the future. We'll give you some time to do that, but like you have to change the way that you're thinking. And so they accepted that and realized that they needed an abstraction. And then they kind of went, okay, we don't know what that means, but we think somebody out there knows what that means, and they chose me to start working on that, and it was fantastic. And then I had to go find a whole bunch of other people that could figure out how to actually make that abstraction real, right?
So what was that abstraction that did become real?
It was basically we had to put some technology on top of the human being,
right?
And ultimately it became like a combination of things that you would expect in a company like that, microservices and self-service tooling and really and a customer experience from end to end that was technology oriented and not human process oriented. And there's still a lot of that too, human process oriented, but it takes time to kind of change. At the time, Akamai was a 13-year-old company when we started that project. So, they had a lot of history and a lot of customer, whatever, customer legacy to change around that. But it was cool.
It was cool.
It's totally fun.
I mean, it's one of the things that there were lots of things that I thought were attractive about you as a candidate. Like when we were hiring you and doing these things. I mean, you're very dapper. There are lots of things. That's not weird.
I'm just going to put my
his watch is amazing. But to the sort of arc of my own keynote and those things, like there's just not it's a particular mental thing. Like there's people who see those patterns, and there's people who see those layers, and sometimes you can see them and you know what they are and they're really crisp and sharp, and sometimes you see them and they're sort of hazy and
murky,
indistinct and murky, and they evolve over time. You believe, and it goes back and forth. There was that moment where you're like, oh, they're going to be really, the boundaries between this layer of the system and that layer are going to be really sharp, and we'll never compromise, and then you're going to compromise. so then layer, you get like, and then you're like, oh, I missed a layer altogether, and then like this piece lives up there and not down here, and I think, one of the things that I love about Corey and why I thought he was so right for the job and so right for the chef community and so right for the places we're going is that, like, there's just not very many people who see it. And who just, they look at it and they see it and they're like, oh, like I see that. Like I don't know what it is quite yet necessarily,
right.
But I see it off in the distance.
Right.
Like I'm there with you and I see that over there there's like a thing, and it's all murky and gross, and I think we're gonna mess it up, and then it's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a delight.
Perspective. That was a theme today.
Yeah.
Perspective.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
What's the quote?
Oh, perspective is worth 80 IQ points. Alan Kay. Yeah.
Alan Kay.
Who has like, you could just have, I think if I ever wanted to just never write a talk again, I would just start reciting Alan Kay speeches and then pretend they were my own and see how long I could get away with it. Because they're so good. Like they're so loaded with.
And they're so right.
They're so right. He's so right.
Yeah, he is so right.
It's so right. Yeah, and I think, the thing about that perspective being worth 80 IQ points is that is that especially when you're talking about the enterprise, I think people wind up in this place where they sort of convince themselves that they're not great and that the companies they're in are somehow worse than other companies, and part of what gets you out of that is that their point of view, of course, is always the company that they've worked for, or maybe whatever the short cycle of their arc is, right? But like if you're me, I spent the last 10 years just talking to all of those people. Like I just been hanging out with all of them in all of their houses, and I'm like, yeah, I met every single one of you, and you're all actually kind of great. Like you're all like really smart and like super capable, and like you're every ounce as good as the people I met at Facebook and Google and Netflix and like everywhere. Amazon, like you're as good as the people who invented EC2. I've met those people and sometimes worked with those people, and like you're every ounce as smart as they were. So like the difference was that like they thought that they should go build EC2 and you didn't. And like that's really all it was, They just like they didn't ask.
And they believed that they could.
And they believed that
they didn't know exactly what it was going to look like when they started.
I can tell you that. And starting a news organization, it's just like I didn't know what it would become, but I had an idea for it. And that's all you have.
And at some point, you believe in someone like I believed in Jesse's watch, or like I believe in Corey now. Like you just meet people and you're like, yeah. Like I want to go on that trip with you, I want to figure that out, and then you see where you go, and they're just telling each other they should never go on a trip, they're like we should stay in the trip that we've been on for however long we've been on.
We talk about cultural transformation, but we don't talk about the often like the illnesses that can be associated with cultures that can really be a depressant in some ways, right?
For sure.
Well, and like to take the metaphor one step further, like you can either be sick and accept it or be sick and deny it, right? Like and that's part of the challenge. Like this is part of the challenge, and this is what we've been talking about this week. I mean, there's a lot of tech that's gone on this week, but there's been a conversation about theology and about belief and about change in the enterprise. And I think everybody that's here has an opportunity to start that. Right? When you know something's not right in the world, in a company, in your organization or whatever, you have two choices. You go back to work and you accept that, or you go back to work and you do something about it. One of those two things.
Third choice. You quit.
You quit. You don't go back to work.
You change your situation.
You don't go back to work.
Go back to work.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. But so that's what everybody is walking away from this week with, I think, is being faced with that set of choices, because one of the themes that we've been talking about this week is like IT fundamentally has to change in the enterprise, change their thinking in the enterprise to continue to be successive and relevant, right?
Yeah,
and to actually serve the business.
I mean, the enterprise, like the whole organism has to change, sort of its opinion of itself, you know?
Well, I had this vision of like, what happens when people are, burdened by so much work, right? Like where they're just trying to keep up with everything that they can. And like, I was talking to some engineers from T-Mobile, and they were saying that basically, historically, 70 to 80% of their time is just keeping systems running, right?
Yep.
And there's really was no space for any way to think differently, to like imagine what you could do.
Yes. I mean, part of the problem is that we talk about it. So, if I think about my own, if you go back, and I'm not saying you should because it's an investment of time, but if you like go back and you look at the sort of arc of what I say at keynotes at ChefConf over the lifetime of ChefConf, right?
That sounds super awesome. I'm going to do that next week.
I mean, thank you. I hope that
I'm a disciple, so
I hope that's fun.
To complete the religious metaphor,
the
cross blowing up in the beginning, and the theology.
We brought the
I
whole
am a disciple.
We brought the whole thing home. I think one thing we might decide to do is if you go back and look at that arc, what you see is that it's us sort of trying to discover what the problem is, and you can sort of chart it from I gave a talk where I listed out everything that I knew about product development and about engineering and about corporate culture and about all of those things, and I just blatted all of that out and was like, okay, here's how all of these things work as I have learned them. And then I gave a talk that was just about culture, and then I was like, oh, I should give another talk. It should be more about something else. And I think now what I've realized is that it's the actual cultural problem is both simpler and worse than we thought it was, because the simple truth of it is that if you just started telling each other that you were great and the best in the world at what you're doing, and that these were solvable problems that you were going to solve because it's the right thing to do for yourself, for your customers, for everybody else, you would just go do them. Mm-hmm. But it's not one person who has to make that transition. It's not like Don Callahan at Citibank doesn't believe that Don Callahan is the best person to run. He believes that. I had dinner with him. He's like a master of the universe. I promise you, he knows he is good enough. There's no question. But something happens as you sort of go through the organization that starts to reinforce with each other that that's not who we are. Right. We start to tell each other that who we are the wrong people, or not smart enough, or
I'm going to lose my job.
Or I'm going to lose my job, or whatever the narrative
or we
is.
Don't have time for
or
it.
We don't have time.
Or what? There's a thousand excuses, and the difference. I think that the difference between the companies that are truly innovative and don't let that stuff get in the way is they just don't accept the excuses.
But how do you come to that issue from underneath, right? Because we hear about this a lot. I mean, we've been hearing about this issue for years.
Yeah.
But how do you come from it? How do you approach it from underneath? And it seems like you were trying to do that today. I mean, and talking about abstractions and such.
Yeah, I mean, the cultural abstraction is that there isn't an abstraction for culture. Culture is what human beings do. So there's no abstraction. There's no abstract culture. There's just how people talk to each other and what they do every day.
But the technology has abstractions.
But the technology has abstractions, and what technology does is, and the abstractions we choose, influence people's behavior. So I have an iPhone in my pocket. And ever since I've had an iPhone in my pocket, my behavior was different, and the culture has changed. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, people go on vacation, and their primary task is using their phone to take pictures of themselves at locations. Not so you can see the location, but so you can see themselves. Mm-hmm. Very weird. That's a distinct cultural shift that happened because a piece of technology, some abstraction showed up that allowed me to take a picture of myself, share it with my friends. Now they all know I'm having a good time.
Instagram's a selfie
Chapel.
platform, right?
You used to take a picture with a camera of the Sistine Chapel.
Yeah.
And then you would put it in a book and be like, I went to the Sistine Chapel, and that's not it now. You're like, I'm in this famous place. Boop. And point being, the technology influences your behavior, and around we go. And so part of the reason to get the layers right in the technology, right, to figure out the contracts between them, is that if we do that right, it changes the way the human beings relate to the thing that they built, right?
It's so funny because as you go through this, I'm just realizing now, I'm now just understanding something that I said in my own keynote yesterday, which is super awesome, right? So I put a tweet up yesterday that was talking about the changing thought patterns, and it was basically in 1998, the prevailing wisdom was don't meet people on the internet and don't get in strangers' cars. And today, we literally summon strangers with their cars so that we can get into their cars from the internet, right? Like that is a standard thing. The technology was the abstraction.
Yeah,
that
was.
changed
That's what
behavior.
allowed that to work.
Right.
Because like everybody knows that that's a terrible idea.
Right.
But once it was just a tap away, you were like, was it really that bad of an idea? And like, it's a bad idea. We were in like an Uber with some dude and he was not a good driver.
Right.
And like,
we've all had that experience.
and like a taxi would have been, look, I've had bad taxi rides too.
San Francisco taxi ride?
Yeah, sure, it can be sketchy,
Ooh.
but it was never as sketchy. It was never unpredictable. Like at least someone gave you a medallion, and even like the mob, if they ran the taxi thing, had a vested interest in making sure everything was cool. Anyway, like they wanted everything to be.
This
chill
sounds
on
like the
money-making
Michael
end.
Cohen story.
Yeah, it's gotten weird. I'll stop. But look, I think, to bring it back to abstractions, what I think happens here is that we have to get better at defining those layers together. Because what the enterprise needs, I believe, is we know that you can build an individual organization that can move quickly. Google can build Google. Facebook can build Facebook. Netflix can build Netflix. We know it's true because it's self-evidently real. What we don't know is what are the pieces of technology we need to build to get them to the place where they do what happened with getting in strangers' cars.
Right.
Because if we do that, then that transition isn't this like deep therapy that has to like go through my conscious brain all the way down to my soul and like be a religious conversion. It's just, oh right, I tap. But like we're so far from that still, and until we figure it out, it won't work. And that's why there's this flaw when people show up and say, well, what we're going to do is just take whatever worked at Google and we'll do it over here. Because that's not what Google built, man. Google built Google. They didn't build the button that got you the abstraction.
Well,
they built what I built. They built a cult. They built a church, you know? And if you understood what I do, if you know what I am, then it works. But if you don't know those things, it doesn't. And that's why we need those abstractions.
Okay, but Google built Kubernetes.
Sure. But what does Kubernetes actually do? Like, I'm not saying Kubernetes isn't good. Kubernetes is great. But what's it do to my brain? Like, how does it change who I am? And the truth is, it doesn't much. Like, it's not actually easier. If you go look at people and you're like, okay, it is easier on one level.
It has easier elements,
yes,
and all these other complexities that come with it,
yes,
right? Which is the truth of any technology and any abstraction,
right? Which is fine. It doesn't make it bad. It just means that it's not enough. You can't and it's not clear to me that it's gonna be that transformation we need to see across every enterprise comes directly out of that experience that way. Not that Google's experience is the wrong experience. Maybe it is. It's just
Google built Kubernetes and gave it to the world. Now, if every single enterprise in the world adopted Kubernetes tomorrow, they still wouldn't act like Google.
That's right.
Yes.
And that's the point. And I'm not saying that if they adopted Chef, they would. They won't. There's a lot of people who've adopted Chef. They're still not acting like they're digital natives. Hence, I'm giving keynotes being like, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out the abstractions.
But that's also the story of open source, isn't it? It's like Kubernetes may have given it to the community to some.
But then we're going to go.
But then you go with it, and then it's the people who take it from there.
And who knows what we build on top of it, right? If they'd never built Docker, I would have never built Habitat.
Right.
You know, if we didn't have Kubernetes, we wouldn't have whatever comes after Kubernetes. I don't know what it is. The one thing I know for sure is we're going to have one.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I know.
So the contract story, then how that fits into all these abstractions, because what we've been seeing over the past 20, 30 years it has been kind of these continual abstractions, which you talk about.
Yeah,
but there's been this lack of definition for the contracts.
Yes.
But it became almost. But what you're saying is like in Chef, in Chef server, I think you're talking about. it had those contracts built in, but they didn't really know about it at the time necessarily.
Well, we didn't necessarily know.
Yeah.
When you look at the companies who I think are successful at moving at that high velocity, those like FANG companies, the digital natives, whatever.
Right.
They all have those contracts defined.
Yes.
But they didn't think about it that way. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's not like they all got in a room and were like, yo, what are the contracts?
What we should do is make contracts.
Yeah, what we should do is make contracts between clear layers.
Right.
It's just what happened because there was no other way to move at the velocity they wanted to move.
Right.
And so if you go ask them, well, what did you do to move at the velocity you moved? They go, I built a scheduler that uses containers to deploy servers onto infrastructure. And you're like, oh, great. That sounds dope. I want some of that. But that's not why it worked.
Exactly.
It worked because you built layers.
Yeah.
And the contracts made sense.
Yeah.
And because you did those things, it worked. You told me the details. I was like, what did you do that worked? And you were like, oh, dude, I built a scheduler that takes containers and puts them onto computers. And that's why I can deploy so fast.
Right.
And you were like, oh my God, that sounds great. I could do that too, which is true. But it's not why it worked. It worked because you defined the layers for the whole system that got you where you were going.
Right.
But that's so hard to see if you work at Google. Because when you were at Google, you just had a problem, which was I have to get the software onto the computers faster, and there's a bunch of them. And so I built a thing that did that. And the fact that you sort of geniusly backed into layers, like that was great, but you can't see it because your perspective was wrong because you were too close, and like the enterprise is too close to their thing too, and so like.
But then other people do though. Then other people do see it.
But other
like,
people do see it. That's where cross-pollination of ideas comes from, and seeing those things. But like that's why that was the revelation for me about those layers, because if we take that thing that they all backed into, and we go, oh, it wasn't ever about the technological details. It was about the layers. It was about the abstractions.
Right.
Okay, well, what happens just in a thought experiment if you run the timeline backwards and forwards and go, hey, if I had defined those layers in my physical infrastructure and now I was going to move to serverless, what are the decisions I would have to make?
Right.
And the decision tree gets so much smaller, because you're like, oh, I know what applications do. I know I have to build a serverless. I have to have a build of all the functions that I'm going to ship.
Right.
And I have to have a way to check that it's healthy. And I have to have a way to know that it works after I deploy it. And you just sort of run down the list, and you're like, and suddenly it's super tractable. You're like, oh, I get it. And that's why there's these crazy innovation machines, because they don't have to reinvent all the other layers.
Right.
They just couldn't tell you what the layers were in abstract because they weren't building generic layers. They were just making Google work.
Yeah. They were just building tech that was specific. And so I think the point here is that like abstractions are good, but abstractions are kind of useless without the contracts at some level, right? You have to codify it. You have to figure out how to take the abstraction, whatever, and we're gonna propose for the next whatever while, here's a pattern of abstractions that seems to make sense.
Oh yeah.
And that is going to make sense until it doesn't make sense anymore.
And then we'll build new ones.
And then we'll build new ones.
Maybe
right?
we're wrong. Maybe we're missing a layer, or we're missing some contract somewhere.
But the contracts are what make it actually usable for real companies, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have to.
And that's my bet, like, and yours too. Like the ultimate bet is.
Yes. Your bet is my bet.
Yeah, our bet.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, our bet is that process is actually the key to unlocking what everybody really wants. And I don't know
that process is the key.
I don't know what the answers are, but
that process is the key to unlocking what people want.
That's the real truth of what you want.
Is that process the key to unlocking want? Is that process then the process that people use to build the contracts into the abstractions?
Right. And they're gonna and that's gonna let you fill in the details of how your thing works. So what you do is build a bank. And what I do, and you want to be a technology company that builds a bank. And so your big challenge is you're busy running a bank. You don't know how to become a technology company. But if we can help you figure out that there's these layers that you need, and that's and those are the levers that technology companies pull to produce a product. Now it's tractable. Now I can say, hey, how's that operating system layer doing? And you're like, oh, it's awful. And I'll be like, great, here's the list. Like it's got to do these things. Let's just do those things. And now you're like, oh, okay, well that was kind of tractable. That wasn't so bad. And then you're like, but I don't have to explain to you how it's all gonna, I can show you that it's all gonna work. And then when we're talking about details, we can make it work. And we just have to do it a lot to really understand which ones the right ones are. But we're gonna do it. And so, the bet is if we do that enough, then we're gonna be better than anyone in the world at helping people get there.
We're not 100% right on the abstractions,
We can't
but
be.
we're right enough.
Yeah, I'm close enough.
We're right enough.
We're not
now
wrong.
to
I
make
could
it.
see. We could see him in the fog.
So at the end of your keynote, you talked about Google coming here in 5 years.
They are.
Will they do? They are.
I mean, I don't know. They haven't signed a
But
contract.
is that kind of part and parcel of what we're talking about here?
Yeah. But look, my belief is that right now there's this separation between technology companies and not technology companies, and one of the not technology companies is going to become as good at technology as a technology company, and they will be indistinguishable. And when that happens, they're going to run faster and outstrip what we think of right now as technology companies. Because right now, Amazon just gets to eat everyone's lunch and there's no competition. People are so far behind them at being a technology company that they're just like, hold my beer. You know? They could just pick an industry and be like, what? You know?
Hold my beer.
Like, they're just like, I got healthcare. Don't even sweat it. Because let me tell you, I'm thinking seriously about joining Amazon Healthcare. There's not even a thing to join. It doesn't even
It doesn't exist?
It doesn't exist.
But you're already signing up.
But I'm kind of
going to start.
because I got a letter from Aetna the other day that was like, you went to a doctor. It's all a thing. We just wanted to make sure. Do you have other health insurance? And they send me this letter every
time.
single time that I do anything. And I'm like, I just told you. What do you think happened between when I went to the doctor last month and this month? You think I ran out, bought new health insurance?
We should need
You'd know, because I would have I get it from my job, which you know. So why would you? And you know who would never send me that letter? Amazon.com. They'd be like, that is the dumbest thing I have ever. They would never do that. And so I'm not sure that my premium's going to go down or whatever.
But it doesn't matter.
It
You're all
doesn't
in.
matter.
You're
I'm
all
all
in.
in.
Yeah.
Because I know they would never do it. And but what happens if Aetna realized that was really existential for who they are?
Yeah.
Who's a better healthcare company, Aetna or Amazon.com? I put my chips on Aetna every day, twice on Sunday. I bet they have more domain knowledge about it than anyone you've ever seen.
Right.
And so if they could just get out of their own way, they'll smoke them.
Right.
But got to get there. No perspective. I just got to send you a letter.
I would almost love to do a poll on Twitter and say, which healthcare provider would you prefer if you could really,
Right.
if you really could have your own choice of providers? It's like Amazon Healthcare.
Or everyone.
Kaiser.
You should run that poll. I will put 5 real American dollars.
That people will say Amazon
It is
Healthcare.
Amazon Healthcare running away with it. Yeah. Running away with it.
Well, that's a great way to end our conversation here. Thank you both, Adam and Corey, for taking the time. Welcome to Chef. I think you're going to have a lot of fun.
We have so much fun.
I'm so excited.
We
to work with
have our bromance going on. It's so much fun. Yeah.
It's great. Well, we love your conference. Judy and I, we're always saying that this is the conference we love to come to.
You got the Golden Dawn Orchestra shirt on?
Yeah.
Love it.
So good. Well, yeah, tonight's party is going to be great. Sorry if you can't come.
Yeah. Well, come to Chef Conf
Chicago.
next year, right?
Come to Chef Conf next year. You can see Recipe for Disaster. It's going to be dope.
Well, great. Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of The New Sack Makers, sponsored by Chef. As always, thanks for listening, and please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts from.